So we heard these words a little earlier, and I wanted us to hear them again as we move into the chapel talk. So Jacob left Beersheba and went towards Haran. And he stumbled upon no particular place, but because the sun was setting, he stayed there for the night. And here Jacob took one of the stones of the place and put it under his head and went to sleep. Amid this fervent activity of a fugitive on the run, this vagabond somewhere between a conflict-ridden past and an uncertain future, he has a powerful dream. It's exactly at this point of limbo, landless, and rootlessness with no real prospects for the future that God meets Jacob at a place of no particular significance and transforms it into a house of God. It is here at this place of no significance with a rock as a pillow that Jacob dreams that there is a stairway set up on earth, the top of it reaching to heaven, and the angels of God ascending and descending on it. So I don't know if you remember either the TV show or the movie The Fugitive. Some of you remember either of those? Where Dr. Richard Kimball, who was played by Harrison Ford in the movies, is on the run from a nationwide manhunt after being wrongfully accused and found guilty of his wife's murder. Well, he escapes and then manages to elude a ruthless and relentless police detective. And I think for most of us, when we watch movies or shows like that, we have a sense of empathy and cheering for the person each time that they escape a situation without being caught. Because most of us tend to root for the underdog, the person who's been dealt a bad hand, and we end up pulling for them. Because I think within most of us, we want to believe that somehow, somewhere, goodness is on our side, that justice will prevail, that right will win out, and that God will not forget about us. So the story that we just heard is sort of the Bible's version of how this all plays out in the story of Jacob. Except that Jacob certainly is not the good guy who's been unrightfully accused. Jacob is a fugitive, but he's not the kind of fugitive that most of us will feel much sympathy. Because if we back up the story a little bit, Jacob is running because first he stole his brother's birthright, and now he has stolen his brother's blessing. And his brother Esau was so angry with him that he had threatened to kill him. So Jacob is a man on the run, not because of what others have done unjustly to him, but because of all the things he has done to them. So we find Jacob on the run between a place where he is no longer welcome and a place where he has never been. He's guilty, defenseless, and scared, and he doesn't have a friend left in the world. So he finds himself out on the hill country north of Beersheba, and he's worn out, and he's strung out emotionally from all the running and cunning and lying and cheating that he's been doing. And he lies down under the night sky with nothing but a stone pillow, and he has a dream. Probably for most of us, we end up tossing and turning at night when we are feeling guilty about something, or if we're struggling with something that has happened during the day. And it seems like that place of dreaming is often the time when we come face to face with the things that we have been running from that day, or maybe even those things we've been running from for a long time. With his defenses down and his unconscious running the show, you might expect that Jacob would have slept the sleep of the guilty, complete with replaying the visions of lying to his father and stealing his brother's blessing. But instead, he receives a dream that could bring tears to our eyes with its unexpected beauty and wonder. Jacob dreams a dream of a stone stairway set up that reaches all the way to heaven. The angels are ascending and descending on this ramp, and right there beside Jacob is God speaking to him, not words of reproach or judgment or accusation, but of great comfort and blessing. The land on which you lie I will give to you and your offspring shall be the dust of the earth, and all the families of the earth shall be blessed in you and in your offspring. Know that I am with you and will keep you wherever you go, and will bring you back to this land. For I will not leave you until I have done what I have promised you. So here we have God promising Jacob, one of the biggest crooks and scoundrels and thieves around, that God will give him absolutely everything he could ever need. It was more than Jacob could have ever dreamed of trying to get, and more than his own father would have been able to give him. And God reassures Jacob that he will stick with him until every last part of the promise is kept. This promise includes that God will be with Jacob as he is traveling far from home, but he also reassures him and promises that he will bring him back home. This is, to say the very least, quite a blessing and quite a promise and quite a dream. And I wonder, when we hear these words, that how many of us, because of the images that we hold of God, or maybe have held of God in the past, that we would have expected God to have something with a little more just in mind. A taste of divine wrath, maybe a little bit of fire and brimstone, or perhaps a dose of Jacob's own medicine for a change, or at least a good chewing him out. But this unbelievably beautiful dream was what Jacob got, not to mention the God who went with it. And as we fast forward into the story, we can also see where it will take a while for everything to play itself out and for Jacob to live into the promises he was given by God. Jacob has this amazing experience of this dream, and yet he is still fully Jacob. It kind of feels like he's sitting on the fence. You know, that place where you feel like, I really, really need to embrace this recovery thing, but there's something that's just keeping me from fully surrendering, like ego or maybe self-will. And Jacob is big on ego, and he is big on running on self-will. He has been running on self-will since he stole his brother's birthright, coming right out of the womb. And it didn't take long upon awakening from this dream for Jacob's ego to kick right back in. Yes, he built a monument in honor of the place where he had this profound dream, and he even called it Bethel, which means house of God. And then he made a vow to God. But I want you to hear the words that he uses as he makes this vow after having this incredible dream. If God will be with me and will keep me in this way that I go, and will give me bread to eat and clothing to wear, so that I come again to my Father's house in peace, then the Lord shall be my God. And this stone which I have set up for a pillar shall be God's house. And all that you give me, I will surely give 1/10 to you. Jacob responds to God's complete unconditional promise of blessing and protection with a completely conditional promise of his own. Did you hear that? If you will give me the land, food, clothing, and protection, then I will be right there at your side. In response to this incredible blessing of God, Jacob's fear and Jacob's ego gets in the way, and he wants God to prove it to him. This is why I love Jacob, because he is so much like us. I'm sure we can all see ourselves in a part of Jacob. He has tried to figure out exactly what he wants and how to get it. Jacob is running for his life, but that first moment where he starts to feel a bit of relief, has some sense that that imminent danger has passed, that ego kicks right back in and he puts conditions on his relationship with God. But there are things in this that stand out to me that I just think are remarkable for us to hear. Before this night, Jacob has been dreaming dreams of how to climb the ladder of success and get more and more wealth. And he climbed, but he never got to that place of being able to know God's blessings or his dreams really realized. And most of us know what it's like to spend so much time doing whatever it takes to get up the ladder only to keep falling off. Or worse, to succeed and discover that the ladder was leaning against the wrong building and that what you thought you wanted has taken you to a place where you don't want to be. And I want us to notice that in Jacob's dream, he's not even on the ladder. And these are some of those subtle pieces of the story that we can miss, especially if we feel like we've heard this story over and over again. Jacob isn't the one climbing the ladder in this dream. God's at the top, but it's the angels, the messengers of God, who are the ones going back and forth. Jacob is just there to receive the blessing. He's to receive the blessing by grace. And I think that can be a hard place for many of us to think of being. Just receive God's grace and blessing. But there is no other way to get it. You can't do anything to earn it or buy it. And we can either spend our time trying to control outcomes in our life, or we can receive a life. When we find ourselves trying to control how life will turn out, we will also find our constant companion will be complaint, because we will never achieve enough or accumulate enough. It reminds me of the saying that many of us have heard in here, that 1 is too many and 1,000 is never enough. But if you make receiving God's grace your goal, your constant companion will be gratitude. God has already made the choice to bless you. Now it's our time to choose to receive that blessing with open hearts. The story is a reminder that God insists on sticking with the likes of people like Jacob and with the likes of people like us. Through all the dark days that our lives can take and all the crooked paths that we insist on taking to get wherever it is we think we need to go. It's significant that God's interruption of Jacob's anxious journey, which displays God's commitment to Jacob, does not contain a word of judgment. Rather, God's words to Jacob contain one unconditional promise after the other. In this grace-filled encounter, we have the chance to see how God can transform an ordinary stone in an ordinary place into something special. A place where God's presence has made a home in the world. Similarly, this trickster who has deceived his father and brother and who since birth has lived in strife with people around him, can be transformed by God into a richly blessed man who ends up serving as a source of God's blessing to others. And this is the blessing for us to receive. Know that I am with you and will keep you wherever you go. I will not leave you. When Jacob awakens and recognizes that God was in this place, even if he didn't realize it at first, he takes that pillow and turns it into a pillar. It's a marker of God's surprising presence and blessing. And marking sacred spots with stones isn't anything new. And if we have some hikers in here, you will recognize the practice of setting stones up, sometimes to mark the way, or at other times to call attention to a beautiful spot, or maybe even a traveler's journal that is hidden beneath those stones. So what I'm going to ask you to do today is I'm going to invite you to come up after the service, and there's this bowl full of stones. And I'm going to ask you to take a stone with you today and place it somewhere today or during this week or the weeks to come where you sense the presence of God. And don't be surprised if it ends up being somewhere pretty ordinary, somewhere that you maybe hadn't thought that God would be, because we're so used to thinking God is somewhere else away from us. So I invite all of us to take that time to see how God is at work in our lives and to feel God's presence at work. And then be open to receiving that blessing that God has for each and every one of us. We aren't going to necessarily have the same experiences that Jacob had, but it's still God. And it's still the same God who blesses and who delights when we too awaken to God's surprising presence out of the fog of addiction, out of the fog of chaos, out of the fog of our daily lives, and say that God was here the whole time and I did not know it. Amen.